Hey guys, Miss Fearing here. We're going to start a new unit, Unit 5, Notes 1 here. We are going to factor out the GCF. The GCF basically is our greatest common factor. So when you're looking at this, we're looking for the greatest number that we can take out of multiple different things. So here's an example that we have here. Miss Cimarine has 46 Snickers bars and 22 Kit Kats in her room. Miss Fearing has 34 Snickers bars and 53 Kit Kats in her room. Pickens is feeling pretty hungry today. He's going to take some of their candy. To be fair, he's going to take the same amount from Cimarine and Fearing. We want to know how many Snickers and how many Kit Kats he's going to be able to take. So if I'm looking at this, this tells me that Cimarine is going to have 46 Snickers and 22 Kit Kats. And then Fearing is going to have 34 Snickers and 53 Kit Kats. So this is kind of an example of what we're going to be doing here with greatest common factor. We want to look for the greatest amount that they have in common that Pickens can take out from both. So if I look at the Snickers and I say, well, Pickens is going to take all 46 Snickers from Cimarine, but that means then he would have to take 46 Snickers from Fearing. And Fearing doesn't have 46 Snickers, so that's not going to work. So if he takes one from Cimarine, he needs to take one from Fearing, two from Cimarine, two from Fearing. Whatever amount he takes from Cimarine has to be done from Fearing. So if we look at this, it only makes sense that he would be able to take all the Snickers from Fearing, 34 Snickers, because he could take 34 Snickers from Cimarine and still have some left over. That's totally fine. So Pickens would go ahead and he would take all 34 Snickers from Fearing, because he would still be able to take 34 from Cimarine. And then when you look at their Kit Kats, it's the same idea. He couldn't take 53 of them because Fearing has 53, but Cimarine doesn't. He'd only be able to take 22 Kit Kats. So this is the idea that we're going to kind of look through here. Here's those questions you have to ask yourself when we are asking you to factor out the greatest common factor. Okay, again, greatest common factor is your GCF. So first things first, you need to determine how many different pieces are there. Your pieces are going to be separated by plus and minus signs. Okay, so if I have 3x squared plus x to the third minus 4x, there's 1, 2, 3 pieces here. Those are what's separated between the plus and the minus. Then you're going to look up the biggest number I can divide everything by. We only do whole numbers, no decimals. So you're going to find the factors of every single number, and then you're going to find the biggest one that they all have in common. That is why it's called the greatest common factor. It's the biggest one they all have in common. From there, you're going to determine your common variables. So this is where you guys have the same letter, but when you're looking at them, you want to look for the smallest amount that they all have possible. So like if I have an x to the fourth plus an x to the third minus an x squared, well, if I have to take the same number out of each of them, this kind of like that Snickers and Kit Kats, the smallest number is the one that would come out of every single thing. I can't take 4 because I can't take 4 from 2 if that only has 2. So you're looking for the smallest number for the variables, smallest number of variables that's coming out. So it's the greatest common factor, but it's the smallest number of variables. And then you want to look, if you were to distribute everything back through, so if I gave you something like this, would you be able to distribute it back through and get back to your original answer? So let's go ahead and look at this. If I am doing this, I'm going to look at my numbers first. So I have a 10, a 30, and a 20. We want to find the factors of each of those. So to do that, I always go, well, 1 times 10, 2 times 5, 3 times nothing, 4 times nothing. 5 is already in my list, so that's all my factors of 10. Looking at 30, I have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 can't divide by 30, 5 times 6, 6 is already in my list, so I know that I'm done. Same thing with 20, 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 3 doesn't go into 20, 4 times 5, 5 is already in my list, so I'm already done. So what you're going to do is you're going to look here and you're going to say, well, what's the biggest number that these lists all have in common? Well, they all are going to have a 10 in them. So what that tells me is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide everything by 10 for sure. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at my variables. Well, I have an x squared, I have an x to the third, and I have an x to the fourth. We want to look at the smallest number possible, so that I'm going to take out an x squared from all of these. So here's how we write that. We write what we took out, the GCF. That goes first. And now we're going to do the division. 10 divided by 10 is 1. X to the fourth divided by x squared. Remember, you subtract. So 4 minus 2 is x to the 2. Minus 30 divided by 10 is 3. X to the 3 divided by x squared. You subtract those. So 3 minus 2 is 1. Plus 20 divided by 10 is 2. X squared divided by x squared. That's done. So what you could do to double check everything, this is my final answer, but you could go ahead and you could try to distribute everything back through and see if you get back up to that answer. If you do, then you know you're good. Let's go ahead and look at number 2 here. So I have 18a squared plus 12a plus 9. So I'm going to look at my 18, my 12, and my 9. Okay, so 18, I know that I have 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, 4 does not go into 18, 5 does not go into 18, 6 is already in my list, so I'm done. 12, I have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, 4 is already in my list, so I'm done. 9, I have 1 and 9, 2 doesn't go into 9, and 3 and 3. So looking at this list, the one that they all have, the biggest number they all have in them is going to be this positive 3 or this 3. So I know I'm going to divide everything by 3. Now look at your variables. I have an a squared and a, but I don't have anything in this one. So since the no variable is the lowest amount, I'm not going to take a variable out, so I'm only taking 3 out. So 18 divided by 3 is going to be 6. I still have the a squared. 12 divided by 3 is going to give me 4. I still have the a. 9 divided by 3 is going to give me 3. Again, you can go through and you can distribute all those back through to see if you get back up to that answer. If you do, then you're good to go. Number 3, 5m to the 7th minus 4m to the 5th minus 2m to the 4th. So I'm looking at a 5, a 4, and a 2. So I have 1 and 5. No other numbers are going to get me to multiply to 5. So 4, I have 1 times 4, 2 times 2. Looking at 2, it's 1 times 2. If I'm looking at the biggest number in all these lists, they only all have a 1 in common. So I can only divide this thing by a 1. But now I'm going to look at my variables. I have an m to the 7th, an m to the 5th, and an m to the 4th. The smallest amount is my m to the 4th, so that's what I'm going to divide everything by. So that 1m to the 4th is out front. That's my GCF. And I'm dividing 5 divided by 1 is 5. M to the 7th divided by m to the 4th, we subtract. So I'm going to get m to the 3rd minus 4. M to the 5th divided by m to the 4th, subtract, you get m. Minus 2. M to the 4th divided by m to the 4th, those are gone. So that's my final answer. Let's look at number 4 here. I have a 6, an 18, and a 3. So 6, 1 times 6, 2 times 3. 3 is in my list, I know I'm done. 18, 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6, 4 doesn't go in, 5 doesn't go in, 6 is already in my list, so I'm done. And 3 is 1 and 3. So the biggest number they all have in common is 3. So I'm going to divide everything here by 3. And then I'm going to see, do they all have a variable? Well, I have an x squared and x. This one does not have a variable, so I'm not going to take any variables out because that's the smallest number of them. So I have a 3 as my GCF out front. 6 divided by 3 is 2. I still have the x squared. 18 divided by 3 is going to give me 6. I still have the x. And then I have plus 1. That's my final answer for that. Again, you can distribute back through and see if you would get there. Almost done here. We got number 5. So I have 12 and 16 that I'm looking for. So 12 is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. 4 is already in my list, so I'm done. 16 is 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. So when I'm looking at this list, I'm going to have a 4. That's the biggest number that they have in common. So I'm going to divide both of them by 4. So now I have an a squared and an a. Well, the biggest amount, or the smallest amount of a's they have in common are just the 1. So 4a is my GCF that I'm going to take out. 12a squared divided by 4a. I'm going to get 12 divided by 4, which is 3. A squared divided by a is a. Remember, you subtracted. These have imaginary 1s there. 16 divided by 4 is 4. The a's are gone. Last example here. I have a 5 and a 30. So I have 5 is 1 and 5. 30 is 1 and 30. 2 and 15. 3 and 10. 5 and 6. 6 is in my list. I'm done. So the biggest number they have in common is going to be a 5. So I'm going to divide both of them by 5. I'm going to look at my variables. Well, this one has an x and this one has a y. So I don't have any variables in common. So since I don't have a greatest common factor, I'm just taking out that 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. I still have the x. 30 divided by 5 is 6, and I still have the y. All right, you guys, if you have any questions, come chat with me, Schoology message me, whatever you have to do so that you're understanding things before moving on to the assignment.